Hi friends, I have a story to tell you today. It has many surprises and feelings. I hope you like it and stay with me until the end. Ready? Let's start. I took a sip of coffee and looked out the window. The garden was covered in frost. It was suddenly very cold. Winter had come to Minnesota. In our garden in Eden Prairie's subscale neighborhood, some autumn leaves were still on the ground. The frost on the leaves shined in the morning sun. It was Thanksgiving time again. I worked as a senior accountant at a big company. My marriage to Jerry was good, and I liked living in this town. The only problem was my relationship with my mother. It was a little tense. "Julie, are you ready?" Jerry asked behind me. I turned and saw my husband. He was dressed in a suit and holding his suitcase. He worked hard as an IT company executive. He was kind and understood my work. He always supported me. He was the perfect husband. "Yes, I'm ready. Don't worry," I said with a smile. Jerry wouldn't be home for Thanksgiving this year because he had an important work trip. This trip was very important for his company's new project. "Did you tell your mother?" he asked. "Yes, but she wasn't happy. She said, 'I can't believe you're putting work before Thanksgiving.'" I said my mother Martha's words like a joke. She was an important member of the First Presbyterian Church and had a lot of influence. She ran the church's charity work and social events. She was a big figure in our community. For my mother, Thanksgiving was more than just a family meal. It was a chance to show everyone what a perfect family we were. My mother often talked about having a pure bloodline. She was proud of our family history here, going back many generations. But sometimes, that phrase felt harsh, especially after what happened 2 years ago. Back then, I had become pregnant but lost the baby. After that, my mother's behavior changed. She still seemed loving on the outside, but sometimes I saw a strange look, like she was quietly relieved. At the same time, my sister Virginia's son, Peter, grew more intense by the day. Virginia was a devoted housewife, actively involved in church activities. She tended to be heavily dependent on Mother, prioritizing Mother's opinions even in raising her 5-year-old son, Peter. Her husband Roger was a real estate company owner. Though honest in character, he had recently shown signs of concern about changes in his wife's behavior. Jerry placed his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" Yes. I turned to face my husband and smiled. "Don't worry, I'll handle it my way." Jerry nodded silently. He understood how I felt. That's probably why he felt guilty about this business trip. I should get going. I stood up and walked my husband to the door. A cold wind blew in. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Many relatives would gather at Mother's house for dinner. My sister Virginia would come with her husband Roger and their son Peter. Virginia had been acting strange lately. She seemed too close to Keith, the assistant pastor who had arrived 6 months ago. While the charismatic young assistant pastor was popular among the female church members, his relationship with Virginia was clearly unusual. I let out a deep sigh. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving, Mother's perfect dinner party. A family gathering in a large White House with elegant table settings. But underneath it all, something was definitely starting to crumble. With my calm and rational nature, I could see it clear as day. My accountant's intuition told me that some significant truth was being hidden, and I had a definite feeling that the time for that truth to be revealed was approaching. What was about to happen might drastically change the way our family existed, but perhaps it was an unavoidable destiny. That's what I felt. The Thanksgiving morning began with a biting cold. In the car, heading to Mother's house, I tried to calm my anxious heart while turning up the heat. The sky beyond the windshield was a gloomy gray, with occasional snowflakes dancing in the air. Mother's house stood in one of Eden Prairie's most prestigious neighborhoods. The large White House, passed down through generations, could rightfully be called one of the town's landmarks. Several cars were already parked in the circular driveway at the entrance. Relatives were starting to gather. As I opened the front door, Mother's voice rang out. Martha had already made perfect preparations, a navy blue dress with a pearl necklace. Her graying hair was meticulously styled, and her makeup was carefully applied. "Is Jerry really not coming?" The question came as if she had been waiting to ask it. There was a slight tone of reproach in Mother's voice. "No," I explained. "He has an important business meeting." "Well, I suppose it can't be helped. You young people always put work before family." Ignoring the sarcasm in those words, I headed to the kitchen. There, Aunt Carol and my cousin Jennifer were already helping with the meal preparations. The turkey had already started to brown nicely in the oven. "Oh, Julie, I'm glad we could help," Carol called out to me. In her eyes floated an emotion that could have been either sympathy or pity. Since my miscarriage 2 years ago, the way relatives looked at me had subtly changed, like this. Soon after, the doorbell rang, the arrival of Virginia's family. "Peter, come to Grandma." Martha rushed forward, almost ready to embrace her grandson the moment she saw him. The 5-year-old Peter laughed happily in his grandmother's arms. Behind them, Virginia wore a satisfied expression. Her husband Roger looked somewhat uneasy and glanced briefly at me. While waiting for dinner preparations to be completed, the usual small talk unfolded in the living room: church activities, neighborhood gossip, children's school stories. But to me, the conversation sounded strangely hollow. In particular, I noticed that Virginia was avoiding any mention of the new assistant pastor. "Well, dinner is ready," Mother's voice echoed through the living room, and everyone began moving to the dining room. The table was set with expensive Lenox china, and candles flickered in silver candlesticks. In the center sat the turkey, gleaming golden brown. "Let us pray." Everyone sat down, folded their hands, and bowed their heads. Martha began reciting the prayer. Her voice was filled with its usual dignity and confidence. "And we thank you for all the blessings bestowed upon us. Amen." After the prayer, the serving of food began. Martha took up the large silver knife that had been passed down through generations and began carving the turkey. Her movements revealed years of experience. "Julie, you're always so focused on work," Aunt Carol addressed me. "Don't you think it's time to find a new purpose in life?" "Yes, cousin," chimed in. "God sometimes gives us trials for a reason." The meaning behind those words was clear. They were referring to my miscarriage 2 years ago. I silently lowered my eyes to the food on my plate. "Well," but Martha suddenly spoke up. While carefully carving the turkey, she said in an inappropriately cheerful voice, "Your miscarriage saved our bloodline from being tainted." Those words struck the dinner table like an icy blade, yet the relatives rushed to laugh. To my ears, their laughter sounded cruel and frivolous. And then came the decisive blow, from my sister Virginia. Gently stroking her son's head, she said with a broad smile, "After all, a grandchild is all we need." There was a moment when time seemed to stop. I slowly put down my fork and quietly stood up from my chair. All eyes around the table turned to me at once. "Julie," there was a slight tremor in Mother's voice. "Please excuse me for a moment," I announced calmly but firmly, and left the dining room behind me. After a moment of silence, confused sounds began to emerge. I stood before the large window in the living room, looking outside. The light snow had turned into proper snowfall without my noticing. White snowflakes were slowly dancing down through the darkness. The sight had a strangely calming effect on my heart. After a while, I heard sounds from the kitchen. When I turned around, Roger was standing there. Virginia's husband wore an obviously troubled expression. "Julie, I need to talk to you." His voice was different from his usual confident tone. As a real estate company president, it carried a complex mixture of anxiety and determination. "Actually, something's wrong with Virginia." I nodded silently. Roger looked around cautiously, then continued in an even lower voice, "She's been meeting with the young assistant pastor frequently." He paused for a moment and let out a deep sigh. "I want to get a DNA test for Peter. Will you help me?" In that moment, all the pieces connected in my mind. Vague anxiety transformed into certainty. My accountant's analytical skills had already begun collecting various circumstantial evidence. "I understand," I answered quietly. The truth revealed on this Thanksgiving night would forever change how our family existed, but it was an unavoidable destiny. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I sat in my home office staring at my computer screen. Jerry was still away on his business trip, and in the silent house, only the sound of typing echoed. I ordered the DNA test kit. An email from Roger had arrived last night. He said he had purchased a commercial testing kit from Amazon. Modern technology has made tests that were once only possible at specialized institutions available to anyone. However, I had other investigative methods. Using my experience and knowledge as an accountant, I could track people's behavior patterns through their numerical traces. I started by examining the church's accounting records. As the person in charge of auditing First Presbyterian Church's accounts, I had access. I carefully checked each record since Keith's appointment. I found unusual expenditures in the church's charity activity funds. Every month, a fixed amount was being transferred to a specific account. While the amount wasn't large, its regularity was suspicious. "Julie, what are you investigating?" A sudden voice startled me. I quickly closed the screen. When I turned around, Mother was standing in the doorway of my study. "Just work, Mother. Preparing for the church audit," I said. Mother showed an expression of acceptance, but doubt remained in her eyes. "Your behavior at Thanksgiving dinner was truly disrespectful," she said. "Mother, your comment was, think about the family's reputation," I started. Mother interrupted me, "especially now that Virginia is about to take on an important position." "Important position?" "Yes. Assistant Pastor Keith has recommended Virginia to be the youth department head." I couldn't help but frown at those words. Youth department head, that was a position with significant influence in the church. But why Virginia? After Mother left, I resumed my investigation, this time tracking Virginia's behavior records, her credit card usage history, phone records, social media posts. Everything was recorded as digital footprints. Patterns emerged. Every Wednesday afternoon, Virginia would go out citing church meetings. However, no meetings were recorded in the church's official schedule for those times. Then I found decisive evidence. At a modest business hotel in suburban Minneapolis, Virginia's credit card had been making regular payments there for the past 6 months. "Roger, I found something." I quietly picked up the phone and contacted my sister's husband. "What do you mean?" "Every Wednesday, Virginia has been going to a specific hotel, and part of the payments are coming from the church's charitable funds." On the other end of the line, Roger let out a heavy sigh. "That's not all," I continued. "When Peter was born, there's a high possibility Virginia already knew Keith." "What do you mean?" "At that time, Keith was doing a short internship at this church as a seminary student. It's in the church records." Silence fell. That silence was like the calm before a storm. "We might not need to wait for the DNA test results." Roger didn't answer my words. However, I could hear his heavy breathing over the phone. The evidence gathering continued for another week. Using my expertise as an accountant, I discovered one piece of evidence after another. According to Keith and Virginia's relationship, hotel reservation records, restaurant receipts, and most decisively, records of anonymous transfers between them, the flow of funds was disguised as church charitable activities. While it was cleverly concealed, it was obvious to a professional's eye. Keith had been using church funds to maintain his relationship with Virginia. However, this investigation had an unexpected side effect. While examining the church's accounting records, I also discovered Mother's misconduct. Martha Anderson had been misappropriating church funds for personal use for years. While the amounts were trivial, the fact was serious. With this, I let out a deep sigh. This evidence would be a powerful weapon to keep Mother in check, but whether to use it or not, my heart wavered. The turning point came in an unexpected form. One afternoon, Virginia suddenly visited my house. "Julie, you're investigating me, aren't you?" My sister's voice mixed anger and fear. "What are you talking about?" "Keith told me someone's been examining the church's accounting records." I silently stared at my sister. Virginia's eyes wavered with anxiety and panic. "Please keep quiet." Her voice suddenly turned pleading. "If this comes to light, Mother will, the church will." "Tell me honestly," I said quietly but firmly. "Tell me everything." And Virginia began to talk, meeting Keith 5 years ago when he was a seminary student, their secret romance, and Peter's birth. "Does Mother know?" Virginia covered her face with both hands. "Yes, but Mother covered everything up for the family's reputation." At that moment, my cell phone rang. The screen showed a call from the hospital. "Hello, Miss Anderson. Your mother has been rushed to emergency. We suspect a stroke." After hanging up the phone, I turned back to Virginia. My sister's face had turned pale. When we arrived at the hospital, Mother had already been taken to intensive care. Waiting there were church officials, and Keith was among them. According to the doctor, Mother had suddenly collapsed at church. The cause was shock from receiving an anonymous letter of accusation at the church. That letter detailed Mother's misappropriation and Keith and Virginia's relationship, who Virginia said in a trembling voice. I silently looked out the window. Under the cloudy sky, snow had begun to fall quietly, as if trying to gently wrap all the events that were about to unfold in a white blanket. In the waiting room of Fairview Southdale Hospital, outside the window, snow continued to fall in the deep darkness. From the intensive care unit, the regular sound of machines occasionally leaked through. Her condition is stable, the doctor explained. I tried to maintain my composure. Mother's stroke was fortunately caught early. However, the possibility of aftereffects couldn't be ruled out. Let's have a family meeting, Virginia said in a trembling voice. In the waiting room were Virginia, Roger, Jerry, who had rushed back, and me. Keith had already left, urged by church officials. Before that, Roger opened his mouth heavily. The DNA test results are in. I held my breath. The color drained from Virginia's face. Jerry looked at me, trying to understand the situation. Peter, Roger choked on his words. He's not my child. Silence dominated the room. That silence pressed down on our shoulders like heavy lead. Virginia, I turned quietly to my sister. Tell us everything, about Mother, about Keith. My sister remained motionless, covering her face with both hands, but eventually, she lowered her hands and looked at us with red eyes. 5 years ago, Virginia's confession began. When Keith came to the church as a seminary student, her story progressed in fragments, as if unloading a long-carried burden. Meeting Keith when he was a seminary student, secret rendezvous, the panic when pregnancy was discovered, and Mother's decision to rush Virginia's marriage to Roger. Mother knew everything. Jerry couldn't help but interject. Yes, Virginia nodded slightly. Mother covered everything up to protect the family's reputation. She even paid Keith hush money using church funds. My voice involuntarily turned cold. Virginia silently nodded. Her confession perfectly matched my investigation results. Mother's misuse of church funds, hush money to Keith, everything was a strategy to protect the family's reputation. What were you planning? Roger's voice trembled with anger. How long were you going to continue this lie? Virginia stammered, Mother's reputation. Just then, we heard noise from the nurse's station. When we turned around, Mother's bed was being returned to her room. While consciousness had returned, right-side paralysis remained. You can visit now, the nurse announced, but please don't excite her. We visited Mother's hospital room one by one. When I entered last, Mother weakly opened her eyes. Julie, Mother's voice had lost its former authority. In my bag, I picked up Mother's handbag. Inside were the church's bankbook and a notebook recording transactions with Keith. Burn everything. I can't, I answered quietly but firmly. Let's put an end to all the secrets. That evening, the church leaders held an emergency meeting. They officially talked about Keith's inappropriate relationship and the suspicion that he had misused church money. The outcome was no surprise. Keith was fired. My mother lost her role at the church, and Virginia was basically kicked out of the church community. The news spread fast. Local newspapers reported it as a big scandal. Scandal rocks prestigious church, the truth behind the elder family, and it felt like the headlines tore through our lives. A week later, we had a family talk about what to do with Mother's care. A nursing home would be best, said the social worker. Virginia disagreed strongly. You just want to get rid of her, she said. Try to see the truth, I replied calmly. Mother needs proper, professional care. I paused. This is the best choice for all of us. In the end, we agreed to place Mother in a luxury nursing home near Minneapolis. The monthly cost would be shared between Virginia and me, with help from the church's reimbursement. On the day she left the hospital, Mother stopped me. Her right side was still weak from the stroke. You might have been right, she said. I couldn't say anything back. I just held her thin hand tightly. But then she added, I was just trying to protect our family's name. I understand, I said softly, but a reputation built on lies always falls apart. Tears filled Mother's eyes, maybe the most real emotion I had ever seen from her. That night, Jerry and I had dinner together, just the two of us, for the first time in a while. "You did the right thing," he said, holding my hand. "What now?" I asked. Outside, snow was falling gently. It covered the ground like a blanket, as if hiding everything from the past, but I knew something new was starting beneath it. "I'm thinking about finding a new house," I said with a smile, "somewhere a bit farther from this town." Jerry nodded, his eyes full of love and understanding. "Yes, this isn't the end, it's a new beginning. Sometimes, telling the truth comes with a heavy cost, but without that cost, real happiness isn't possible. I truly believe that." A year went by. Jerry and I had moved into a new home in a growing neighborhood in western Minnesota, about 2 hours from Eden Prairie. It felt like just the right distance. I was in the kitchen, preparing to roast a turkey. Outside, light snow was falling. It wasn't as bitterly cold as it had been last year. "Need help?" Jerry asked, wrapping his arms around me. "Thanks, but I've got it," I said, smiling back at him. On the table were some documents from the adoption agency. We were getting closer to creating a new family together. "It feels strange," I said, thinking back. Last Thanksgiving, everything in our lives had changed, like a storm had swept it all away. Mother now lives quietly at the nursing home. She's lost her former power and image but seems to finally be facing who she really is. During my last visit, she looked at me with honest eyes and said, "Julie, I might have been wrong." Her physical recovery was slow but steady, but the emotional wounds were still there. "I cared too much about appearances," she said, "and I lost sight of what truly matters." For the first time, I saw regret in her eyes. Out the nursing home window, I could see a lovely garden. Nurses pushed patients in wheelchairs, and that peaceful view somehow reflected Mother's new life. Virginia's fall was much harder. Her divorce went through, and Roger got full custody. She only sees Peter once a month, and only with supervision. Being kicked out of the church community left her completely alone. "Hey, sis," Roger told me once, "Virginia came to my new place last week." I was surprised. "What did she want?" "She asked to borrow money," he said. Her relationship with Keith had ended. He had moved to another state and didn't send any money for Peter. "I'm sorry," I told her when she came to me, "but I'm not going to fix your mistakes anymore." She left in tears. The sister I used to know was gone. Meanwhile, Roger had moved forward. He gave everything to raising Peter, even though he knew he wasn't the boy's real father. He treated him with deep love. "Julie, I'm really thankful," Roger told me on a recent visit. "Thank you for telling the truth. Peter doesn't understand it all yet, but he's growing up in a loving home. That means a lot to me." The chaos at the church had started to settle. A new assistant pastor had taken over, and the stolen money was slowly being paid back. Money was tight for Jerry and me, between the nursing home costs and other things, but it was the result of choices we made. "The turkey smells good," Jerry said, pulling me back from my thoughts. The warm smell filled the room. This Thanksgiving was just the two of us. Simple, but peaceful. The table was covered with a white tablecloth and our new dishes. It wasn't fancy, but it felt warm and full of love. "Hey," Jerry said, looking at me, "are you happy?" I paused and then nodded slowly. "Yes, this is real happiness, not the kind built on lies." That's the lesson Mother finally learned, and through that pain, we found something new. Outside, snow kept falling softly. It wrapped the world in white, gently welcoming the start of a new season. Just like that, our lives would keep moving forward, slowly but surely. "Oh, by the way," Jerry said, picking up the adoption papers, "next Thanksgiving, we might be a family of 3. I squeezed his hand. A new kind of family, not based on blood or appearances, but something real. "Yes," I said, "this is our new life, built on truth, not lies." In the oven, the turkey turned a perfect golden brown. The smell wasn't a reminder of pain like last year. It was a sign of hope for the future.